This Buffalo Bills press conference was so bad that I came out of it thinking that Brandon Beane staying and not being fired was the absolute correct thing to do. Terry Pegula had an absolutely horrendous day on the microphone, and Bills fans, I'll be getting into everything he said in this press conference and my thoughts on all of it in this video. But before we do that, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel down below because we're trying to grow this channel to 1,000 subscribers by the start of the 2026 season. But let's get right into it. I'm not going to waste anyone's time. This first tweet that we're starting out with is my own Twitter, and this says Terry Pegula did not speak to Josh Allen before firing Sean McDermott. I thought this was a very key part of this entire story. Josh Allen was not told by Terry Pegula that he was going to fire Sean McDermott. This decision from Terry Pegula came after the game in Denver in the locker room when he was walking around, seeing all the faces of Bills players just being upset by this loss, and it seemed like they were just drained of everything. Josh Allen didn't even acknowledge Terry Pegula when he came up to him after the game saying that was a catch on Brandon Cook's play, which we will get into that again in this video. But I thought that it was notable that Terry Pegula did not consult with Josh Allen, and not only that, but Josh Allen has not spoken out in the last 2 days regarding Sean McDermott being fired, not a statement. And when Terry Pegula was asked today about how Josh Allen felt about the firing, he said he would keep that conversation private, which I believe is the correct thing to do, but also very noteworthy that Josh Allen has not come out with anything of any sort regarding the firing of Sean McDermott. But let's get into the rest of this press conference. Let's just break all this stuff down, play by play. So you'll see right here in this tweet, so Alina Getzenberg first tweeted out, Bills owner Terry Pegula said his decision to bring a new coach was based on the results of our game in Denver. And Adam Schefter said, it now seems jobs can be won or lost in one game, when there sometimes can be a questionable call. Now, why is that important? Obviously, we know that this play right here, the Brandon Cooks catch, that was the reason why we lost this game. And Terry Pegula said that the reason why there's a new coach is because of the results in Denver. Now, what we're going to be pulling up right here, I'm going to search for this, is Brandon Beane was asked by the team falling short. And you will see exactly what happens when Terry Pegula chimes in.
I mean, Jay, a bad call.
So we'll replay that.
The group falling short of that.
I mean, Jay, a bad call.
So Terry Pegula says that there's a bad call in this game. That is the reason why the Buffalo Bills fell short against the Denver Broncos in the divisional round. But also that's the reason why Sean McDermott was fired. So Sean McDermott was fired because of a bad call. Now, I agree with the decision to fire McDermott. I believe that, his time was up. He had 9 years in Buffalo to try to win, to try to get this team over the hump to win a Super Bowl. But the reason you fired was because of a bad call, not because of the accumulation of losses year after year, but rather because of a bad call that ended up losing us the game. That I don't understand, but we'll just go through all these tweets that I have from this press conference. So Aaron Quinn, Beane confirms that they did not have a plan to replace McDermott and that this is an open search. Now, at first, when this news came out from Diana Rossini, I believe it was last night or 2 nights ago, after the firing of McDermott, Bills fans were outraged at Brandon Beane, thinking that he kind of snaked Sean McDermott. He was the reason why Sean McDermott was fired. There was an internal power struggle. Brandon Beane made a power play by saying to Terry Pegula, hey, I should be here. Sean McDermott should not fire him. That was not the case at all that we have learned. Terry Pegula is the reason for all this incompetence. And honestly, I feel bad for Brandon Beane because when you take a look, an objective look at his body of work, he's a objectively good GM. He has not done a bad job. There have been bad moves that he's made, but he's not a bad GM. I think that people's problem is that he wasn't like an extraordinary GM. So why is he getting promoted? He had no control over all this, it kind of seems like, unless I am kind of naive to what Brandon Beane was saying. But it seems like Terry Pegula was behind all of this, firing McDermott, promoting Brandon Beane. And one of the reasons why Terry Pegula promoted Brandon Beane is because of the fact that he drafted Josh Allen, because of the fact that he was kind of maneuvering in that draft to really get up to get Josh Allen, and he credited that to being one of the reasons why he is still in the building, which I understand, but like I said, Beane confirms they didn't have a plan to replace McDermott. Bills fans were outraged at first, but the reason why they didn't have a plan is because Brandon Beane didn't even really necessarily want McDermott fired, but Terry Pegula did, came up with the idea on his own, and as a result, clearly that there's no plan to replace McDermott when Terry Pegula was the one just, in charge. Also, this was an insane situation. So this is regarding Keon Coleman. So the a Bills reporter was asking to Brandon Beane about the players on this roster, how some of them just aren't good enough, and one of the guys mentioned was Keon Coleman. Now I'll play this video for you guys, and then you give me your opinion.
Yeah, can I interrupt? I'll address the Keon situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff, who felt strongly about the player. And, he's taken, for some reason, heat over it and not saying a word about it. But I'm here to tell you the true story.
So, okay, the way that this came across was so horrible that I was at first a little disgusted by this. Basically, what Terry Pegula was trying to say, I'll give you all the full context before you guys lose your minds like I did when I first heard this. So Terry Pegula was basically trying to say how there's a collaboration effort with Brandon Beane, the front office, the scouts, and Sean McDermott and the coaching staff and the personnel guys. And Brandon Beane, he had Keon Coleman, on his draft board, but he had him lower than where Sean McDermott and the personnel guys had him. So as a result, the coaching staff pushed to draft Keon Coleman. And while it wouldn't have been Brandon Beane's next pick, it's not like Brandon Beane had no control over the pick, and that he was ultimately the one who turned it in. Brandon Beane took, accountability for that. He said, no, he was my pick later on, which and that's one of the reasons I feel bad for Brandon Beane. He kind of do a lot of covering up for Terry Pegula today because he put him in a lot of bad situations. Brandon Beane took accountability for the Keon Coleman pick. But the problem we have here is Keon Coleman is still on this roster. So we went from maybe trading away Keon Coleman because he hasn't produced for the Buffalo Bills to a potential situation where Keon Coleman could be requesting a trade because the owner of the team was saying how he wouldn't have picked him basically, and that Brandon Beane, he wasn't his next choice. That is ridiculous in my opinion that you're just going to throw that out there when Keon Coleman is still on this team. I don't get it. Let's see what else we have from this press conference. So we have the head coach request. We'll get into that in the second part of this video. This is just another part from the locker room where Terry Pegula ultimately made his decision to fire McDermott. Bills owner Terry Pegula said he went to Josh Allen, who was crying in the locker room after the loss to the Broncos. Pegula told him that was a catch. Allen didn't acknowledge him. He gave everything he had to win that game. Just another example of why Sean McDermott was fired, just because of how the locker room felt after the game. And this one was even more absurd. So, Bills owner Terry Pegula on firing Sean McDermott while promoting Brandon Beane to the president of football operations. He said, that was my decision. I could be wrong. Now, this just puts Brandon Beane in an even worse spot because now he has the pressure of all right, I can't prove Terry Pegula wrong. It makes no sense. I don't get it. I don't know if I have it bookmarked here. But Brandon Beane kind of went over the moment he had on WGR, the radio show, where he called in basically, complaining to the host about how they were complaining that we had no receivers. Brandon Beane kind of came to the defense of his receivers, saying he believed in the receivers on the roster, and that's why he called in to make that statement to, instill his faith in them. But he says that the only regret he has is that he put too much pressure on the receivers. It was not personal with the host or anything. That's kind of how he acknowledged it, that he was just trying to, instill faith in his guys, but as a result, he put too much pressure on them. That was one of his regrets from that whole situation. Let's see what else we have here. Nate Geary this tweet is perfect. Or one of two tweets I think was absolutely perfect from this press conference. So he said, people keep talking about a Beane and McDermott disconnect, which is what we were all thinking the last 2 days, how there's a power play possibly. No, which also Terry Pegula said if there was a power play, he would have fired Beane for trying to make that play. But Nate Geary says, it would seem to me there's a clear disconnect with the two sitting on the stage in front of us, that being Brandon Beane and Terry Pegula, and I could not agree more. It seemed like they were very out of sync. It seemed like Brandon Beane was just trying to cover for Terry Pegula, with Pegula just making excuses, in favor of Beane, but Beane kind of recognizing that the way he's coming across is absolutely horrendous. And even though some of the points he made were good, Beane kind of still had to cover him because it looked horrible in the press. Furthermore, right here. So Patrick Moran tweeted this out, saying what we learned today: McDermott fired because the QB and team were sad in the locker room. However, Terry says Bills lost because of a bad call. We went over that. Josh had zero input in the Sean firing, which he will have input in the next head coach, which I do not like because of the fact that he was one who wanted Ken Dorsey as the offensive coordinator. So the one coach that he wanted hired was Ken Dorsey. Bad look, didn't work out. So I honestly didn't really want Josh Allen involved in the search. But it is what it is. He is the franchise QB. They're going to give him what he wants. And the only thing that I disagree with Patrick Moran was he said BBB, big mad over character questions. I personally think he was rightful in defending his character because Bills fans were kind of coming for his throat, saying that he snaked Sean McDermott, that he made a power play, all this. Whereas Brandon Beane, in reality, was also caught blindsided by Terry Pegula with making this move by promoting him and firing McDermott. So him coming to his own defense there, I'm very understanding of, and I understand from Brandon Beane and Aaron Quinn. This is the second tweet that I thought was absolutely perfect. He says, I was completely in favor of firing both McDermott and Beane, which I think I was, and a lot of you guys were too. But after watching the presser today, I'm honestly still glad Brandon Beane is an adult in the room that maybe can keep this thing afloat. And that's exactly how I feel right now. It is clear that Terry Pegula has kind of lost his mind. He cannot run a football team. And the fact that we will still have Brandon Beane, who has been a part of this team for the last 9 years, kind of keeping that culture somewhat in the locker room, I absolutely love that. I think that, Terry Pegula bringing in a new head coach and GM was kind of a scary thought. You see, that was my top comment right here. Just an absolutely horrendous thought. And I think that was about it from the press conference. Yeah, and this was a questionable thing. So Terry Pegula said that talent is the reason why Buffalo has been so successful, but it adds how practice squad players are making an impact. And Dan Feets, he quote tweeted it, said, but the Bills were in big games because of the coaching staff. Because the coaching staff was able to get the most out of the practice squad, I agree. That kind of makes the coaching staff look a little bit better than the personnel guys and Brandon Beane in the front office. However, I think that, kind of goes hand in hand. It is what it is. But that is it for the press conference. But now we're going to get into the head coach candidates that were revealed this morning. Okay, so this morning there were a bunch of tweets reporting out the initial head coach interviews for the Buffalo Bills. And I know a lot of you guys will immediately be upset because there are 3 names on this list that are familiar with the Buffalo Bills organization. Those being Joe Brady, Brian Daboll, and Anthony Lynn. Now, Joe Brady, our offensive coordinator, you guys know I do not want him to be our head coach. And as a matter of fact, if he was gone as our offensive coordinator, I'd be pretty happy about that. Brian Daboll, I've learned to be in favor of because I really do believe that he would be good at leading this team. And that was one thing that Brandon Beane mentioned, how we need a CEO kind of head coach, not just a play caller, because some of those can fail when they're leading a team, but you need a CEO kind of guy. I think Brian Daboll could be that guy. As for Anthony Lynn, I want no part of him, to be honest. He was a former Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. He moved on from us to be the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, did not have a ton of success, and now he's the Washington Commanders run game coordinator. I just don't think he's fit to be our head coach. He failed with the Chargers, and he's been a run game coordinator. I think him going from run game coordinator up to a head coach again doesn't make the most sense. We need a guy who's kind of either a familiar face in Daboll, who, even though he hasn't had success, he knows the Bills' culture and can kind of build on that. Or you just need an outside guy who is not familiar with the Bills organization, but could give you like a young offensive mind or a young defensive mind that can really elevate the talent on this team. And the next 3 guys are Grant Udinski, Anthony Weaver, and Lou Anarumo. So Grant Udinski is the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive coordinator. I would absolutely be in favor of potentially hiring him. However, I do have him below Brian Daboll just because of the fact he is young, not a ton of play calling experience, and how much influence did he have in Jacksonville in that offense? Was it Liam Cohn who was leading that offense, or was Grant Udinski more involved than maybe we think? We don't know. Anthony Weaver, the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator. I've seen some people out there, be in favor of potentially hiring him. I admittedly don't know enough about him. And again, Lou Anarumo. I know a lot of Bills fans are very excited by the potential thought of him being hired. He is, I believe, 59 years old, so he's would be kind of a CEO kind of guy. He's a defensive guy. However, I don't fully know a lot about him, so I can't comment fully on him. If we're gonna go defensive, I want Chris Shula if we're going defense, and if we're going offense, I want one of Clint Kubiak or Brian Dable. Now, additionally, Clint Kubiak, as well as the Broncos coordinators, the Rams coordinators, and the Patriots coordinators, they cannot be interviewed until they lose because of the rules by the Buffalo Bills. I believe it's because we fired our coach in the playoffs for the fact that we were a playoff team that prevents us from interviewing other playoff teams' coaches until they're eliminated. So this weekend, I do kind of want the Rams to be eliminated so that we could interview Chris Shula, because I honestly do want to go with the defensive coordinator as our head coach, and also bring in an offensive coordinator like a Davis Webb or like a Cliff Kingsbury. I think that would benefit us the absolute most. For Bills fans, those are the head coach interviews. And guys, like I said, we can't interview guys who are still in the playoffs. So give me your thoughts in the comment section down below on who you want the Bills to try to interview once they get eliminated from the playoffs. But that's going to do it for this video. Bills fans, I hope you enjoyed this one. And if you did and you made it this far into the video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to help this channel grow. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.